Podketeers.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, please welcome your host, actor, musician, and Disney Parks aficionado, John Stamos.
Thank you very much. I am honored to be back here at D23 Expo. I never feel more comfortable than when I'm in a room full of Disney geeks like myself. Can you turn on the house lights? Let me see the beautiful faces out there. It's cool now to be a Disney geek, isn't it? And also, I just became a D23 Gold member. I have a card. Who's a Gold member out there? Who's not a Gold member? I have a lucky ticket for somebody. Hold on. Coming down. This is my cardio for the day. I'm exhausted. Here's my buddy down here. Daniel, you are now a Gold member. D23, buddy. Please come. That's my old buddy Daniel. You know I had to work so hard. Okay, I also want to say hello to all the Disney nerds out there, all over the world who are watching on the satellite. Hello, everybody. Hello to my big fat Greek family out there. They're not in Greece, they're in Gardena, but I wanted to say hello. Right here on the stage 2 years ago, I had the honor of moderating the D23 Expo's Legends of Walt Disney Imagineering. The biggest thrill for me, of course, was to meet the incredible Marty Scrum. Marty began his career early on before Disneyland opened, and he worked all the way through, being the head of Imagineering, and he was a great, great guy. He was so spry and so funny and so sharp. He literally put me in my place for the whole hour. And we have a really cute clip. Take a look.
Next is through Inner Space.
Right, I know.
And this was Disney's answer to Haight-Ashbury, I think, at the time. It was a wild trip, and Claude was the genius who put all the things you saw in there together.
That was the makeout, right?
It was a makeout, right?
You told me it was the makeout.
There you
right?
go.
Yeah.
You had to use Old Spice when you went under.
Marty passed away about a week after that. But to me, he will always be the keeper of the keys, Conscience, the Jiminy Cricket of his organization, and he is very much his. All right. Carrying on Marty's tradition, our presentation today features four very talented men, four men who are creative storytelling geniuses, and myself. But it's a lot of dudes. I think we need a Disney-obsessed woman out here to help me moderate. And I think the perfect one would be my wife, Caitlin. She has Snow White's gentle compassion for others. She has Cinderella's strength to overcome hard times and emerge as Belle to see the beauty in this beast. Here she is to help me moderate, which is code for interrupt me for an hour, Caitlin McHugh Stamos.
Thank you so much to my Prince Charming and Fairy Godhusband who's making all my Disney dreams come true, including getting to hang out with all of you guys here at the D23 Expo! Everyone having as much fun as I am? Yes!
Come sit down here, young lady. Now, let me ask you a question. What do you get when you mix one Disney nerd with another Disney nerd? He came out just like that. Both of us are so Disney obsessed, and we're also obsessed with the legends that you're about to meet. We wanted to name our son Walt, Mowgli, Marshmallow, Dreamfinder, Tony, Hahn, Don, Stamos. But it was a little long. I think I wanted to name him just Pooh. After my weird uncle who rarely wears a shirt. He wears a shirt, but he doesn't wear pants. Save me.
John and I have been fortunate enough to have all of our Disney dreams come true.
Yeah.
Over and over again.
Yeah, the happiest memories in our life all seem to be connected to some sort of Disney experience.
Theme parks for our birthdays and the Disney movies that have inspired us and helped shape who we've become.
We got engaged at Disneyland. We honeymooned at Disney World.
Yeah, and I got to go to the grand oopening of Captain EO.
I was at that grand opening.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I should have said hi to you.
Oh, I would have said hi, but I was 6 months old.
Time to introduce the legends. Okay, we got to start the show. First up, a true Disney legend who began his career as an animator under Walt Disney, working on such films as Sleeping Beauty and The Jungle Book, and returned for a whole new generation of films, including The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Mulan, Toy Story 2, and Monsters, Inc. Please welcome Floyd Norman.
Star Tours, Indiana Jones Adventure, and Disneyland Paris, it's Tony Baxter.
He's a prolific producer, director, artist, and author who was behind such films as Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, Waking Sleeping Beauty, Frankenweenie, and Maleficent. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Don Hahn.
And last but certainly not least, this gentleman is at the forefront of a new generation of talented filmmakers at Walt Disney Animation Studios. Paul was head of the story on Oscar-winning features Frozen and Big Hero 6. His directorial debut, Disney Animation's 2020 feature Raya and the Last Dragon, was announced just yesterday here at D23 Expo with our new best friend, Paul Briggs.
All right. And let's start in the place where Disney storytelling began 95 years ago. The man himself, Walt Disney.
I believe video.
We have often been asked, where do we get the ideas for our stories? So on this program, we will try to answer in part this question. Potential story ideas exist all around us, and our storymen have been trained to closely observe everyday happenings with the thought of twisting a common occurrence into a cartoon story. Occasionally we find that books are adaptable to cartoon ideas, or maybe a song will suggest a story.
Walt Disney.
You would draw hilarious cartoons of your colleagues and of Walt, which led to you being tapped to rewrite Jungle Book. You say it was cool to be in that room with Walt as long as he didn't notice you. Why was that? And Walt was such an impactful storyteller. Can you tell us about him?
Well, honestly, I think Walt Disney was an intuitive storyteller. It just came natural to him. He just had this gift, and I can't think of anybody who connected with audiences better than Walt Disney. He just knew what would touch an audience, what would move an audience. And Walt was just a great storyteller. It came natural to him. Being a Midwesterner, he really identified with the comic man. And not only did his films play well in America, they literally went across cultures. I mean, fans loved Disney around the world. So Walt was just a natural, and it's difficult to find storytellers who are that good, and it almost comes easy to them. So it was just a pleasure.
And when they noticed your drawings, and you were kind of sassy with the drawings about Walt and stuff, but that got you noticed, and then, as you say, you went upstairs. You were the fortunate one to go upstairs, and we worked on the Jungle Book, right?
Yeah, and that's because Walt's daughter, Diane Disney Miller, said that her dad was probably the best gag man in the studio. So Walt loved gags.
Yeah.
And so when he saw my gags about him and about the other Disney artists and animators, he knew that I was, maybe I should have been in the story department.
Funny guy. Well, storytelling is the currency of humanity. You know who said that, Don?
I think it was me.
It was you. It's so true. I mean, we pass along our beliefs. The stories tell us how to be human, dealing with despair and difficult times. But also, in all of your storytelling, which I love so much, there's hope. There's always hope. And I think I speak for all of us that we need you guys more now than ever. So, no pressure. How have you taken that hope that Walt, captured so well and brought it into your films today?
Well, it is inspiring because Walt's films always had that optimism to them, and his parks always had that optimism to them. But he wasn't afraid of showing all the sides of humanity. So he wasn't afraid of showing suffering and grief,
right,
and ridiculous comedy, and he was all about the entertainment of it. So if you could take home a theme or something, great, but he was first and foremost about the entertainment and the experience that the audience would have. Because when we go to the movies, we want to know what it is to be human.
Right.
I want to know what it is to walk in the shoes of those characters, whether it's Pinocchio or Mowgli or whoever. And that's what was so inspiring to me and what we try to do in our movies now.
And you do so beautifully. Tony, now this is my great bragging right that I know Tony. We've become friends, and I'm so grateful for that. And 2 years ago, we had dinner, and I said, I've got to get you on Splash Mountain, because he created Splash Mountain, and it's my favorite ride. And to get that picture, when you go down the thing, and they take the picture, get a picture with me on the ride, Tony Baxter. Take a look. Wake up. Where is it?
Where? Okay.
Where is it? There it is. Look at when I like big dummy, I covered his face with my hand. I'm taking you back tonight, Tony.
Yeah, we'll do it again.
Tony, there is so much crossover between films and rides. How did you decide what to include from the films to create the Indiana Jones adventure?
Well, it was pretty easy. You have to look at the things people expect and then depart from there. And there were certain things in that film you couldn't do without the rolling ball. That could not be a thing. And other aspects, you get the flavor of what the emotion of that ride was, or that film was. And it was all about action. And what was interesting, I'm losing my voice. In the early years when we started it, we couldn't have done what we did. We didn't have the technology to do it. So it was a case of the technology coming along that allowed that ride to actually happen. Because I think the unpredictability, the aspirational sense of being Indiana Jones, all of those things are what works in a story for a ride, as opposed to in a movie when you want to invest in the character. You become the character in a ride. So how do we do that? How do we get the rolling ball? How do we get the doors to change? How do we get a fire to happen every 18 seconds? Those are the things that are a challenge and must be there for the audience to get the effect of the essence of that film.
And filmmakers have worked hand in hand with and become Imagineers. What was it like working with Mark Davis, Claude Coates, Mary Blair?
Well, I was so lucky because I call myself the oldest of the youngest that got in there. That meant I worked with all these people. I worked with Mary and Claude and Mark. Now, if you look at that sketch that Mark did of the pirate and the boat, straddling the boat in the dock, greedy with so many hats, you don't need a single word of a script or a traditional story to read that drawing. That drawing is visual, and everybody that's not paying attention in the boats gets it right away. And that was his particular thing. His staging was impeccable. I don't think any other Imagineer I have ever worked with had the sense of staging as well as character design. But in a ride where you only have a second, staging is everything in telling a story. And his things were impeccably done. Yeah. And then Claude was exactly the opposite. If ever there were two people that were yin and yang, Mark was gregarious and Claude was humble. But Claude dealt in the world of backgrounds at the studio. And we came over to Imagineering. He complimented Mark because he created these environments. And sometimes we don't give the background and the layout people the the honor that the animators get. But in film, Walt once said about Cinderella that, you know, you wouldn't believe in Cinderella if you didn't believe in the backgrounds, creating a real place for her to live in. That's why when the magic comes and the coach changes and the dress changes, you buy into that because we did such a good job of establishing a world. And that's what Claude did. His magic worked with Blacklight and Fantasyland and the Pirates of the Caribbean and the Haunted Mansion. Nobody could do that. And then Mary was just one of the most amazing people to be around in her understanding of shape and relationships of patterns. And she had some problems with her eyesight, so she wore 3 pairs of glasses. And that allowed her to see shapes or colors or anything else. So when you look at all those amazing patterns and everything, imagine looking through a kaleidoscope and getting all these different angles on it. And I think her childlike sense came through, and I know that both Mark and Claude loved working with her because she brought a look that they couldn't possibly do. Mary just had a way of seeing through the clutter and simplifying things down to a basic, design.
Paul Briggs, I see you down there, Paul Briggs. Look at this handsome young man.
I'm like a fan. I want to just turn my chair.
Well, like, aren't you in awe of these guys on stage like we all are? But let me tell you something. After your big announcement yesterday, you belong on this stage just as much as anybody. Let that sink in. You're the next. Sweet man. He also drew this when I proposed to Caitlin. He made that little drawing for us, and we're very grateful. I never take this stuff for granted, so thank you.
Well, I got to admit though, really quickly, it's a strange thing when you're laying in bed at 11 o'clock at night and you get an email on your laptop and it's from John Stamos that says, "Paul, I'm laying in bed next to Caitlin. She's asleep and I'm trying to type really quietly, but I have to ask you something." I'm like, where is this going? Luckily, with to help with their engagement.
I needed help.
Was that first sentence? I was like, this can go in a lot of different places.
What's your approach to storytelling? What's the first movie, Walt Disney movie you were in?
My favorite?
Yeah.
Raya and the Last Dragon. No, I do love, each one has a very, and this is actually how I do approach storytelling. Each one has a very different meaning for me that I've worked on. I love all of the classics too, though. But I come at it from a very personal place. And when I look at Frozen, for example,
can you ask voice? He's Marshmallow.
I did do Marshmallow. I'm a giant angry, I'm also Yama in Big Hero 6. Like, I play these giant angry characters. But I am not an angry person. I hope I'm not. But I do come from a very personal place. When they asked me to come on to Frozen, I was like, I don't know, princesses. I love that. I love the singing and everything, but I'm trying to find the connection. And I met with Jen Lee and we talked about sisters. And I have 4 sisters, and I know, John, you've got a lot of sisters, so we understand sibling dynamics that are complicated. And so when Jen started telling me about this story about the sisters, I was like, I'm in. I get this family love, this family bond, that you would do anything for them at the end of the day. And even Big Hero 6, when they asked me to come on to Big Hero 6, I love superhero stories, I love Marvel, but really at the end of the day, Big Hero 6 is a story about loss and grief and accepting that into your life. And I was like, I get that. I had lost my mom a year earlier, so I was like, this is a story that's important to me that I think other people will connect with and empathize with. So that's really, I think, always what drives my storytelling. And also, you know what though, real quickly to say this as well, Dean and I talk about this a lot with our movie, Raya and the Last Dragon. There's something special you want to say. I mean, Dean always says, like, it's the song in your heart. And I believe that too. There is a song, I view movies as songs, and that's something that, I guess that's also a big part of it. It's just like, what do you want to tell the world and sing out to the world?
Nice. Well, that's sort of what Dawn was saying, what you were saying about what Walt did when he showed, despair and loss and then hope at the end, which is really nice. Or from silly symphonies to Fantasia, Mary Poppins, Walt knew the music that was so integral to stories. Dawn, you work with the most iconic songwriters. You've done all these Broadway shows, including Beauty and the Beast. I'm sorry, took those, the movies Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Tell us about working with some of those composers and those lyricists.
I think the thing they all had in common, whether it was Howard Ashman and Alan Menken or Tim Rice or so many other different people, is they were storytellers. And that sounds obvious, but it's not. A lot of musicals have songs in them that are just meant for entertainment, or a couple falls in love, so you feel like they have to have a love story. And especially what Howard was all about was plot. You could take a song like Ursula's song in Little Mermaid. Ariel has never met Ursula, doesn't know she exists at the first note of that song, and 3 minutes later, she's signing away her voice and signed this contract to go up on land. And that all happened in that song. Or the opening of Belle was all about Belle going shopping and meeting Gaston, meeting LeFou, and seeing everybody. That was all in a song. Right. So I think the amount of plot in a song, and what these guys always did that amazed me is you put songs in a movie not for the only reason that this is the only place that your heart has to sing out. It's what you said. It's I'm so in love that I can't talk anymore, so I have to sing. Right. I'm so angry at the villain, I can't talk anymore, I have to sing. So it's those moments, those peak moments of the story that those songs go in, and I think that's what makes not only the films of our era, but of Walt Disney's era, so memorable.
And the genius of Walt and you and some of these direct Paul, like you'll look and you'll go, you know what, we need a song right here, right? And just put it there to help tell a story or move.
Yeah, and a lot of times they don't work, and a lot of songs fall by the wayside. And like Can You Feel the Love Tonight, we tried to cut that out of the movie because Lion King isn't a love story. And so we did cut it out of the movie for a while. And then we thought, well, let's have Uma Timon sing it because maybe it'll leaven it and be more fun. And then we showed the movie to Elton, and he convinced us to leave the song in the movie. But he had a good reason for it. He felt like these are the songs that Disney movies are made of, those emotional connections. And of course, it went on to win an Oscar and everything else, but he was right. It's that emotional connection you have to the characters through the music.
It is a love story. That movie is a love story to me, especially the father-son. Mm. Go ahead.
You worked with Alan Menken and Howard Ashman. How was working with them and how they helped mold the stories?
Wow, they were incredibly involved in it. So if you look at Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast or Aladdin, they were there all the time. And Howard was going back and forth between Los Angeles and New York, and Alan was in Los Angeles for extended periods. And they were in the story room. They were with these guys, with the story crew, coming up with ideas. And at one point in Beauty, we took all the storyboards back to Howard in New York, and it was so challenging and fun because we'd be ripping things off the storyboard and repinning things, and Alan was there with a portable piano and just trying to workshop this stuff and make it work all the time. So amazing people, but right there in the room. They weren't ivory tower writers. They were right there with us in the room, and I think that's why those songs feel so integrated into the story.
Do we have a clip of from your movie?
Yeah, well, this is a clip of Howard. This is 30 years ago, and it's Howard when he first arrived at Disney lecturing about Little Mermaid, and he's talking about the song Part of Your World. And you think, oh, it's just a love song, it's no big deal, it's just about love. It's not at all about love. It's about how she's trying to get up on the surface and all the seeds of story and plot that he's planted in the lyric of that song. To hear him talk about it is really amazing.
So that's got a lot of very, very specific information in it. And this is something that, there are a couple of ways you can write something like that. If you look at most songs in that vein are less specific than that, to be quite honest with you. I was interested just for myself in trying to give more specific information and yet keep it feeling like a ballad. It's her dream. You're not going to miss what the film's about. That's the central issue of the entire film. By having her sing it, makes that point develop. She wishes she were. At the end, she will become human. That's what she wants. And I don't think it's a mistake at that point. There's some foreshadowing involved in it. You think the lyric, it is complicated, even though it's simple. There's foreshadowing there when she says, what would I give if I could live out of these waters? What would I pay to spend the day? Fact is, she's going to make a deal with the devil and see that she's going to give up her voice, she's going to give up a lot, eventually you have practically her life in the country. She's going to have to pay something very important. So there's foreshadowing involved there.
Wow. I sort of asked you all about, you know, placement where you need a song and where you put it, and I think we have a clip that you haven't seen yet.
From Frozen, actually. It's featuring Kristen Anderson Lopez and Robert Lopez with Alan Menken, Stephen Schwartz, and Lin-Manuel Miranda talking about a moment that you helped inspire.
Ooh, I've never seen this, so this is
Animators are such believers. They are the most dear-hearted people.
And then the best meetings too, because you leave the meeting and there's 3 drawings of you, because everyone's doing it.
Exactly, and then you frame them and put them on the wall.
Sometimes it's not very flattering, we found. So I would love to hear from everyone about a moment in their movies that was actually inspired by a visual. Like for us, Do You Want to Build a Snowman is all written because we were trying to figure out how to get a backstory of the girls that you could actually feel. And we were talking, and during that time, our head of story, Paul Briggs, drew 2 girls on either side of a door. And I was like, Paul, what are you drawing? And he brought it up to the camera and we were like, that is Do You Want to Build a Snowman? And I find that writing for animation, you just get all of this amazing inspiration from them.
Wow. Paul. How did that feel?
That's really special, actually. I do remember that day, and Bobby and Kristen are incredible. And it's the same thing. They're right there with you, just like, you know, Ashman and Menken were in there. It's like they're just helping you sculpt and, you know, shape this story.
And then when you're sitting in the theater and you see that character and you see the audience react to it, and you watch us just forget our lives and whatever we're going through and dig into that story. How does that feel?
It's really, really special because you invest so much into developing them. You stop developing them and they become real people to you. I care so much about Anna and Elsa. And so when people have this reaction to them where they care just as much about them as you do, it's extremely powerful.
That's a beautiful gift that you have, all of them. Floyd, we haven't heard from you in a little bit. Let's talk about the process. Like I remember you were saying that, like, you'll do something, it gets thrown out. Do something, thrown out. Do something, thrown out. Like, talk to us about that, and then also, like, has there been something great that you just loved that got thrown out?
Well, that is the story development process. It's mainly trying out ideas. And I tell young story artists who are just coming into this business that most of what you do will be thrown away.
Hear that?
Almost everything you do will be thrown away, but we keep the good stuff. There was a lot of stuff you didn't see in the Jungle Book because Walt Disney decided that it didn't work, so consequently it was cut from the film.
Do you remember anything specific?
Well, there's one sequence I remember very much, Rocky the Rhino.
Okay.
Rocky the Rhino was a very wacky, zany character voiced by Frankie Fontaine. I don't know if you remember, he played Crazy Guggenheim on Jackie Gleason show, for those of you who are old enough to remember Jackie Gleason. But Walt didn't think Rocky the Rhino was very funny, so that sequence was cut. But it doesn't break my heart when something's cut from a film. We had a marvelous sequence in the film Mulan. That was kind of cute. It's when Mulan and Shang had to share a tent together. It kind of risque, but in good taste. And it was a hilarious sequence. It was really funny, but it just didn't work with the narrative, so that very funny sequence had to be cut from the film. But it didn't break our hearts. That's just part of the process.
Interesting.
Now, Tony, back to you. I have waited hours and hours in lines for your rides. Over and over and over again. I've been going to Disneyland my entire life. I'm in my 30s, and I am still not tired of them. How do you do that?
Well, I have a secret. Most people design something for the first and only viewing in a film or whatever, but with the rides, they're going to be doing just what you did, or we'd be out of business, So I designed the attractions I work on for the 20th ride, which means you have to ask yourself, I've waited in line 19 times for an hour. Why am I in this line again? And I think the best answer to that was a storyteller's postcard to Walt Disney. Does everyone know Ray Bradbury? Yeah, okay. So imagine Ray Bradbury and Charles Laughton in a Peter Pan pirate galleon. This is absolutely true. When he got out, he went over to the postcard rack and sent Walt a postcard that said essentially, Walt, I'll be eternally grateful. Today I flew out of a child's bedroom window over London in a pirate galleon on its way to the stars. Wow, and that's what it's all about. You are flying that journey and making the story to reflect the kind of worlds that these guys created. But this time at Disneyland, it's your chance. And that doesn't get old. I think all of us today, I can tell you right now, there's a line that's 45 minutes to an hour long across the street to do that journey, to get to do that. So
you put new stuff in, or do you put little hidden things, or?
Yeah, well, like the other things we have to do is because we're taking a 90-minute product essentially and condensing it down to 5-10 minutes at the most, or even 90 seconds in a dark ride. You have to use other tools, like in the rendering there of Splash Mountain, the ending, the finale. It's the finale of the ride. So what do you do to tell that story? It's the end of the day, it's the autumn part of the year, and we've got more audiomatronic animals than you've ever seen in your life singing the good old finale. So that's a way of doing that. The other thing that my predecessors, and we try to continue too, is the magic of lighting to tell a story. You know, you can look at that Peter Pan flight down there and realize if we illuminated that room, it would be a room. But by turning out all the lights and then only illuminating what the artist's brush paints, we control exactly that story. So you're only seeing the elements that, you know, take you away to another world. So you're in a room that's not much bigger than the stage we're standing on, not where you are, but right here. And yet, for all intents and purposes, you're flying over, you know, Never Never Land. So those are very powerful things. And John Hinch had you know, something that was very powerful that I thought was great about the environments of Disneyland, and that was eliminate all the contradictions, whether they're colors, their music, or things that don't reflect the main story that you're telling. So when you walk down Main Street, the music reflects not just music from the era of the turn of the century, but films and other stories that we have heard that we love. So I was very passionate about putting Hello Dolly in that, because Put On Your Sunday Clothes is now a Disney movie. And, you know, the Fox deal. But, you know, yeah, right, Sound of Music too. Anyway.
Was that song Married that was in Up, was that first on Main Street?
Which one?
The Married song?
Married. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, but that's the whole thing. It triggers times in your life that reflect that place and strengthen it. Music becomes a tremendous aid when people are, you're not in a theater where you're paying attention. You're talking to your kids and all that. So you've got to work on a secondary level, and that's what the parks are all about.
Cool. We're going to switch gears again. Let's see. As we all know, many Disney films draw from classic stories. Dawn, how closely do you stick to the source material for well-known fairy tales?
That's an amusing question. We don't. I mean, the great tradition of Walt Disney storytelling is to say, oh, what a nice fairy tale, and then just, you know, not throw it out, but basically throw it out and start over again.
Disneyfy it.
You know, I hear Floyd talking about Jungle Book. That was notoriously storyboarded and thrown out a couple of times before the final version to lighten it and leaven it. If you look at the original fairy tales of something like Beauty and the Beast or Sleeping Beauty, a lot of times they're dark, a lot of times Little Mermaid, you know, they're very difficult to adapt exactly the way they are. Pinocchio, they're twisted and disturbing fairy tales, it's what attracts us to them. But there's something really wonderful and human about those stories that we are attracted to, but you have to be happy to throw things out and slay your darlings along the way and say, you know, this may have worked 200 years ago in a French court, it doesn't work today.
Yeah.
Were those fairy tales public domain? Like, you guys just, somebody doesn't have to.
That's helpful.
Yes, any of you can do Beauty and the Beast. It's a public domain thing.
All right. Paul, talk to us about research of the real life places and people. And you told me a great story about when you were doing research for Raya, the Hidden Dragon. What is it? Last Dragon.
You missed the panel yesterday.
You know, Raya's a dating app. It's a celebrity dating app. Bob Saget. But it is. Right.
Research is super, super important. I mean, we're constantly striving for authenticity in our films, and because we're creating a fantasy world, the world that Riot in The Last Dragon takes place in is in this place called Kumandri, but it is inspired by Southeast Asia. So we were really fortunate. Whole team of us, we traveled through Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, down to Bali in Indonesia, and it's a really interesting thing because there's research that you're looking at these incredible environments and landscapes. I mean, Angkor Wat, everybody should go visit Angkor Wat. That is an incredible place. But for me, it's much more emotional research. In Laos, for example, we're invited to take part in this, it's called Basi Sukwan Fest ceremony. And it's basically all of the elders and some family members from this area come together, and it's a blessing ceremony. And they actually always keep this one on. I've had it on for like a year now. It's getting a little dirty, but it's this white band. I had all of my arms were covered with these white kind of pieces of string because each of these elders comes up to you, and as they're tying this little string around your arm, they're telling you this good fortune, this blessing of safe travels and where you're going, and to know that they are with you and that they have love for you. And it's this beautiful thing to experience that, to sit back and go, this is something that I want to take back with me to my family, and know that my family members even are loved and supported and give them a blessing. So it's really impactful when you experience those things in other cultures, because it just helps you in a strange way look at your life better, and you learn from them, and you just kind of look at it and you go, this is what our world needs more of. I love that so much. So that stuff starts to just inform even the story you're telling about bringing people together. And
do they know that you're doing research to do a movie about them and their culture?
They did, yeah. I always approach it when I come in. I try not to hide anything, and I'm always very open with them, and I say, this is the story we're telling, because that's really how it begins. It begins with me and Dean sitting together going, why is this story important to us? We're looking at our own families, we're looking at our boys, our children, and we're going, what is the message that we want to resonate with them? And so when you have this kind of fantasy world, but then this very personal story, you go on this trip, and when you share that story with people, they really open up and they go, I understand what you're trying to do. And this is and just from an observer, I'm sitting there looking, and they're going, this is our world, and how we're approaching something very similar, which all of a sudden makes the world seem a little bit closer together, which is a beautiful thing when we can see like someone on the other side of the world is dealing with something very similar, but not the same.
It's a small world, after all.
That's where that's going.
The cathedral, the Notre Dame Cathedral?
Yeah, with let's talk about Notre Dame. Victor Hugo, when he wrote that novel, said he climbed up in the towers of Notre Dame and he saw carved into the rocks the word fate. And that was his inspiration for writing this amazing piece of literature. And so we did. We got access to the towers and the bells of Notre Dame and climbed way in the heck up in the air. And there's something about it. It's the emotional travel that you're talking about, where you're absolutely transported not just to another time, but to another ethic and aesthetic and cultural time. It's like time travel to stand there and look at these bells that were forged 300 and 400 years ago, and the beams that have been up there from oak trees that grew 400 years ago. And it's emotional. And then you have a setting that you can put those characters in. And that setting becomes the storytelling as much as the characters themselves. So yeah, that travel was really moving, and the wine was really good too.
Here's something that I didn't know until today, that Walt Disney Studios, they created the storyboard first. They did it first, and now we use it in films and television and creating rides. Floyd, tell us about, what is the storyboard for us?
Well, the storyboard is simply a visual narrative. It is the way of visualizing the script. Mm-hmm. And it's because motion pictures happen to be a visual medium, it's hard to think of making a movie without thinking in terms of visuals. Now for me as an artist, as a cartoonist, I tend to see everything in pictures. So to me, the images always come first, and then I add the words later. Now, back in the early days, Walt Disney was the only studio creating storyboards. But now storyboards have become, everybody uses them. Big films are not done today without storyboards being created first. Guys like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, Alfred Hitchcock used storyboards extensively to nail down his visuals. But it all started with Walt. It was all Walt Disney storytelling that gave us the storyboard.
Is that you? These are your drawings. These are yours, right? From
yeah, I think so. And some shots of Walt as he.
He used to draw, goof on all the colleagues and put them up on. Do you guys do that, Paul? Is that what animators do?
Yeah, it's actually every April 1st we have a caricature show, which is brutal. It really makes you reevaluate everything in your life. So it's still going, and nobody's safe. Jen Lee, everybody is on the fair game.
Do people know whose style it is? I mean, Walt knew it was you, right? He said, "Hey, you smartass, come up here and be funny." Right?
You mean on the storyboards? Yeah. We all drew alike. So many of us on Jungle Book, Dick Lucas and Eric Cleworth, Vance Jerry, and myself. I honestly had a difficult time trying to tell my drawings from all the other guys because we were all drawing basically with a grease pencil.
Yeah.
That was because Walt loved the grease pencil, the China marker, because he liked big, bold drawings. He liked ideas to be put down boldly and dramatically. He didn't like a lot of frou-frou, so he wanted ideas to be clearly stated. So we all used these big, fat China markers when we did our storyboards.
Would he go up with a marker himself and fix things, change things?
No, usually Walt would just go to the board and rip things off. Then fall to the floor.
Now, theme parks have also used storyboards and models and computer simulations to create the immersive worlds that we love too. How do you like to visualize your attractions?
Well, I'm a visual thinker, so the script always comes after the place starts to take shape. So you've got, maybe a piece of ground, maybe a challenge that the park has to fill an area with more people. Those become kind of the leading things, and then you kind of back into it by creating in the case here, you're looking at Splash Mountain. It was a very tight piece of ground. And when it was under construction, it looked like the 5-story apartment building was going in next to the Haunted Mansion, because it was steel, and everyone's going, "What have you done?" But, we knew this story was going to fit. We start with New Orleans. We have the plantations of the Haunted Mansion, and then out into the bayous. So we had a nice segue there. And once we planted it all out, like the model looked, and the models give us so much confidence that it's going to work. So when everyone is at the park freaking out about this big giant building, we're seeing this model, we know where it's going, and so that becomes, in the same way as the storyboard is so critical, and we do them too. But the models become something where you can't cheat. There's no way to cheat. It's the same piece of ground, only miniaturized. So many times those models are built big enough that they can be used in the field, so that 1 inch in the model equals a foot of ground in the space. So it's an incredible tool to us.
But there was a bunch of extra figures laying around from America Sings.
No, well,
and we have these figures. What are we gonna?
These elements. I think for me, what Marty used to call it the blank sheet of paper.
Yeah.
And by that, it's like we don't even have an idea. We just know we need to do something. How are we going to do it? The best way to get that quick is to think of something that you were completely, inspired by, or just became such a part of your life. Something that touched you, like the Wizard of Oz, or for me, the Moses parting the Red Sea. And if you look closely here, you can see Triton, King Triton, parting the seas to our original Seas Pavilion idea. And we didn't build it as Floyd says. We don't always build everything. I think it would have been great though. But we had Triton throwing his Triton out at the water and parting it, and then allowing all the guests in the audience to walk through the ocean into the story of the sea, which I thought would have been a very theatrical, very Disney thing, and very aspirational. And it would have given me my Moses moment.
Yeah. They did it over at Universal, so if you want to go over there, they park the stage and walk right through.
Well, hey, we both like this guy, don't we?
Oh, Figment, my favorite.
We were on a track, and we had gotten Dreamfinder, and I watched Magnum P.I. the story told about Magnum hit a goat. He told Higgins it was just a figment of his imagination, and Higgins said, "Figments don't eat grass." And I said, "There's our name." Anyway, what turned it into something that everyone could digest and really fell in love with was we brought the Sherman Brothers again through music, came on board, and we said, can you create a song like they did for Small World and they did for the Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow, Carousel of Progress and the Tiki Road? How do you explain this complex thing of you're gathering information, storing it, and then creating something new from the things you learned it in? And they said, we got it. And so out of that came one little spark. And then that just became the unlocking moment to kind of creating that whole attraction.
Hey, Paul, you have been a sort of a part of the movement of bringing more women into the Walt Disney Studios, right?
I think, yeah. It's interesting because Floyd and I were talking earlier about just the story process, and really, it hasn't changed that much over many, many years. It's funny you bring up the rhino thing because I actually have that photo stat behind my desk, and I keep it as reference of it's a Bill Peet sequence. Incredible economy of boards. So storyboarding hasn't really changed that much. What I see really changing right now is this dynamic, and it's awesome, of a lot of women coming into animation. Half my story crew is women, and they are incredible. They're super smart, and I love it. And I think they're bringing all these really powerful stories, even like within the studio. There's Natalie Norgott, who just showed her short here, and of course Jen Lee, our Chief Creative Officer. And even Josie Trinidad, like there's some really incredible women in the studio right now, and it's a great time, really. Because when I started, there weren't a lot of women in story, and now I look at the department overall, and I'm extremely excited for this change happening.
Good for you. And you were the head of story for Frozen, right?
I was. Yes. Yes. It was an amazing experience because, again, like working with Jen Lee and Chris Buck, I have so much respect for them, and the songwriters too. So in that movie, we were just talking about how films get, you'll be working on something for a while. Frozen at first was this love triangle between Kristoff, Anna, and Elsa. And Elsa and Anna weren't really so much sisters. And so at that time when I saw the movie, I wasn't on it, but I looked over there and I was like, nope, I don't want to do that love triangle. That's not. And then all of a sudden that whole thing was thrown out. It's like now this becomes a story about sisters. So it's really exciting. And plus I think too, what's fun now is, like I was saying before, storyboarding really hasn't changed much. We're drawing completely digital, which is really fun. And we pitch now, rather than on these boards that you saw even Walt pitching, we actually come into the story room and we pitch these stories just digitally on the screen. So we're going through them. These are some of my boards from Princess and the Frog. So I kind of just go through these things and pitch them digitally. But it's the same exact process.
You still draw it, right?
Still draw it, which is really hard because you're a writer and you have to visually communicate. It's all about visual communication, and these ideas. And so in some of the hardest storyboards that I have to draw, I know when they are coming because it's, even in this song sequence, Mama Odie's song, there's a line in the script. We work a lot closely with writers, but there's a line in the script where it says, Naveen looks over and falls in love with us. And you can see in his eyes, he's falling in love with Tiana. And I was like, how do I draw that? And it's incredible because I spend a whole day drawing just 2 eyes, where I'm like, no, he's not in love. And it all came down, it was really funny because it all came down to just a slight, like I drew a pair of eyes, and then all of a sudden it was just a little bit of the eyes just opening just a little. And it's really it's more about what's happening behind those eyes of going, this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. Which I know that feeling, and I'm just trying to capture, which is such a hard feeling to capture in a drawing. That's when you're like, I shouldn't have chosen this profession. I could have been anything else. Why did I choose to draw? It's so hard. But when it works really, really well. And that's the Disney magic in our movies.
I picked the right guy to email to help me with romance.
He's such a perfectionist. He came over to our house and he was beautiful Winnie the Pooh on our son's nursery. And he took all day doing it.
It was fun. I loved it.
Such a perfectionist about how he's going to do it. And when I first asked him, I said, do you have like an intern who would do this? We don't want to, and he was like, no, I don't trust one. I'm going to do it.
Want it done right.
It was beautiful. so beautiful. And a lot of storytelling does have to do with the background and the world that these stories belong in, which we talked about with Tony and the rides, but I want to talk about it in films as well. We Disney films like Sleeping Beauty, Wonderland, The Temples of Jungle Book. I mean, the incredible live-action world with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Mary Poppins, Tron. Dawn, how do you create these entirely new worlds for film?
Wow. It's about creating a sense of transportation for the audience. I always feel like creating a world is like the transportation business, where you can take the audience to a place and a time that they can never go themselves. And when we go to the theaters, we want to get that feeling of suspended reality. We want to go feel and kind of walk in the shoes of other characters. And the environment in that world is very much a part of that. And it is, by the way, if you're making attractions or if you're painting oil paintings 100 years ago or painting on cave walls, the work of an artist, be he or she a writer or artist, is to show you what it's like to be me, show you what it's like to walk in my shoes for a day. If you can do that, that's the macro aspect of the world you're building. Then you can get down to, okay, how can that world help tell my story? How can you walk into a room and there's no character in there? Like if you were to walk into my bedroom as a kid and I weren't there, you would know everything about me, which I won't reveal right now. But you do. You'll learn about that. If I were to, go into any of your rooms and rummage around, which I'll do later today, you'll understand who that person is, and that's that transportation. That's that world building that we all try to strive for.
That's interesting. And Paul, you've done Zootopia, which is a whole incredible world. I mean, tell us about that.
Big Hero 6.
Big Hero 6.
Yeah. Well, it does. It all starts with that. You want to be, when you go to a movie theater, you want to be transported to this magical place. It's this escape from the world you're in a way, and you go, okay, everything that's going on in the outside world, I don't care about anymore because I am here. And I really appreciate when, again, it comes back to research and authenticity, and you can see that the filmmaker has done their homework, and you start to build these worlds, but they make sense. I mean, even with Zootopia, there was a ton of research just done in animal relationships and the dynamics between certain animals and herbivores and carnivores. And so there was all this research done that then starts to influence design and construction of sets, because we have to build everything from scratch. Nothing is given to us for free. So you got to make a door for an elephant, but you also have to make a door for a mouse and everything in between. So there's just a lot of just research again.
Do you ever just lay in bed, like right before falling asleep, and just have ideas? Does that ever happen to any of you guys?
It's a dangerous thing. It's a dangerous thing. I call it the story Rubik's Cube, because all of a sudden my brain starts solving story problems. I'm like, okay, I actually have an old vintage Game Boy that I'll play Tetris just for a second, just to make my brain stop. It's now, there's so much to do.
I did mine on traffic jams.
Oh, really?
An hour every day.
Something hits you in the middle of the night, you go,
because you're completely focused on just the rear bumper of the car.
Yeah. You want to talk about color? Floyd, tell us about color.
Well, Don had spoken earlier about Mary Blair, and Mary had a tremendous influence on the Disney feature films. She had such a brilliant color sense. And I remember going to Pixar Animation Studios in the 90s to work on Toy Story 2. And one of the things I noticed was a lot of Mary Blair color concepts on the walls of Pixar. And I'm thinking Mary probably did these sketches in the 40s or 50s. And here we were, years and years later, and a whole new generation of artists still referring to the beautiful color sense of Mary Blair. So she's had a profound influence on animation, both at the Walt Disney Studios and Pixar.
Tony, you talk about color, lights, black lights in your rides.
Yeah.
I noticed, when you go into some of your rides with the black lights, you can see who has caps and who,
Yeah, right. Again, there is that. Black lights are great in the kitchen too, if you want to spoil your wife's cleanliness there. But no, all of these tools, whether it's black light or it's the technique we created on Indiana Jones to give you the sense of motion as you're going through a ride, and feeling the experience for the first time, telling a story through experiential feelings. All of these are no different than the original paint that was put on a cell. They're just another tool that we have to tell a story in a more meaningful way that immerses you more deeply in it. And so I think that's always been a tradition of Disneyland. And when those original blacklight rides were created, I think they were the most immersive things that had ever been done. Maybe the Jungle Cruise I would put in that too. After seeing the film that's been generated out of that yesterday, it looked fantastic. So I think a lot of people have those rides as a communal experience that's lasted for coming up on almost 65, 70 years. Yeah.
To infinity and beyond, what's the future of storytelling? Technology, will that come into play more and further change the way you guys?
Well, technologies, we've all been over there, right? Smuggler's Run, and wait till you see the other one, and I think I can talk a little bit about it because you saw it today.
Can't wait for that night.
It involves so many different technologies that have got to work together, and that's why it's taking our team a long time to deliver this, is to make sure all of those things work. But when you move through a seamless experience, crossing from one type of transport to another, it's extraordinary. Nothing like that's ever been done before. But at the end of it, it's just about telling a story. If you just put it there to blow people away with the technology, it wouldn't work. It's like when Star Tours was fresh, when we did it in 1987, we all thought, we'd have a good year if we just made a fun bump in the dark kind of simulator ride. But we put it in concert with Star Wars, something every kid grew up with. And here it is now. We're plus 40, I think, almost on it. Close anyway, 80, I can't, 90, 30 something. And it's still got a line out there because it's not that it's a simulator and that was breakthrough in 87, it's that it takes you, allows you to go into that world. And the world building thing is going to be awakened like never before with all these technologies.
Floyd, you've been telling stories a long time. What do you think the future holds?
Well, I've been able to, kind of like see the transition. I mean, I started out old school Disney. When I came to the studio, Walt and his artists were still making films, pencil and paper. Everything was hand-drawn, hand-created. And then transitioned to Pixar, where I went up to Pixar and saw animation totally change, totally transformed by the new digital medium. So, but I think one thing will remain the same. Storytelling is basic. Whether it's done by hand, whether it's done by computers, good solid storytelling is Disney. And that will always be with us.
No matter what. That's beautiful. Very quickly, we only have a few more minutes, but I want you all to go down the line and tell us what story influenced you or moved you the most?
Paul. Start with me. I think a really impactful story, I would say, is that changed my life, honestly, was when I was little. I was in this bookstore, this Walden's bookstore in Florida, Boca Raton, Florida, and I found this book called The Illusion of Life. And this is a book written by Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston, two of the 9 old men. And I started flipping through this book, and it was my creative Bible. I thought this is something that people do, people draw. And it was a really big book. That book is like this thick. And I remember my mom came up to me in the bookstore. She's like, "Where have you? I've been looking for you forever. Where have you been?" And I was like, "Mom, this book." And we were at the time pretty poor. And I remember her holding this book and flipping it over, and I could tell her eyes were looking down at this price tag on this book. It's an expensive book. But then I just remember her looking at, and it must have been my eyes, but she was like, "Okay, we'll get this book."
Oh, thank God. I thought she was going to steal it.
This could have been a tragedy. Could have been a tragedy. Again, I could have. But I swear, even as we were walking through that mall, I was still just flipping through these pages, and I thought, I have to go there. That's this magical place that are people like me. Like, I was constantly drawing, and even in these drawings, I could tell right away there was emotion and life in these drawings, and I was like, I want to do that. And my mom, to all her credit, really kind of put me on that path of going, there you go there. And here I'm
Incredible.
Honestly, I'm super fortunate, and it's an honor to be sitting now on the stage.
Don Hahn?
I feel the same way. I always feel like, why am I here? Because it's such a collaborative medium, and I think all of us understand that, is that we work with hundreds and hundreds of brilliant people, and that's, we might be spokespeople for them, but we're collaborators. And when I was growing up, the movies that were mostly influential to me were, you'll laugh at some of these. One was Charlie Brown Christmas.
Yeah.
Because it's a perfect movie. One was, when you analyze it, it is full of heart. It's not the most amazing animation you've ever seen. The studio tried to cancel it. It was never to make it on the air, but it has that great jazz score and everything else. It's so moving to me. And the other one that I think traumatized us all was Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, sure.
Totally caught me at a young age and still haunts me every night.
Tony?
Well, Sleeping Beauty was when I was 12 years old, and I think I sat in the theater 3 showings to see the dragon fight at the end of that. So that impressed me. And then I think the stop motion work of Ray Harryhausen was another thing.
Which one?
Ray Harryhausen, that created the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad and Jason and the Argonauts. Those were real, but not real. It was something that, it was before CGI, and so it was a primitive way of seeing animation in dimension. And that got me, I think, thinking about getting into the dimensional side of this, and finding a way to bring creatures and places to life in a dimensional world with that incredible styling of Ivan Earl and Sleeping Beauty. If I could marry those two, it'd be amazing.
Floyd?
Walt Disney's probably shortest feature animated film. I have to thank my colleagues, the wonderful Dick Humer and Joe Grant, for giving us a little film called Dumbo, the film that really influenced me.
Well, gentlemen, discord is at an all-time high, and decency at an all-time low, but thank God we have gentlemen like you and the women to tell these stories and lift us up and make this world a better place. Thank you very, very much.